All right. And how do I sound?
Good.
Oh, good. Good. Okay. Okay, so for those folks who are new to Nazareth or don't know who I am Davin Sturdivant. I am the owner, fearless leader, and head coach around here. During the off season, we typically do clinics of various sizes and shapes. So, sometimes we do track walkthroughs, sometimes we do car specific things, sometimes we do technical things, sometimes we do driving things. So, this is going to be one of our racecraft ones. Originally, it was going to be me and Michael, but Michael got invited to a race with Trackalicious, so it's just going to be me. And that is just okay. So, all right. All right, so a little bit of background about myself for those of you who don't know. I've been amateur racing for about 20 years or so. I have a background in competition go-karting, club racing, autocross, like Solo 2 autocross. I've been published in a whole bunch of places, like Ross Bentley's work and a few other places. Done work with Coach Dave. I ran my own karting for him for a really long time. So this is just a thing I do because this is the thing I do. Because I am doing things on my own, and this is also a free clinic, I get a chance to do some shameless self-promotion, so you have to sit through that. I also do some paid coaching with a program called Apex Advisory. It is a bunch of guidance and feedback on how to race better. I do some premium paid coaching work. I do some individual stuff. I do some data analysis stuff with people. So you probably see me dropping links here and there for that work, for like stuff on YouTube and stuff on the newsletter and yada yada. Most of you guys have gotten a lot of this content for free for years, and it has kind of evolved into more of a paid slash model where folks like donate to help for stuff, because it helps to like pay for equipment and pay for other coaching stuff I do and pay for tires for the race car and like other equipment. So I really do appreciate that. But I let folks know that that's a thing that I also do in addition to Nazers. I try to keep a separation of church and state, so that's why I don't like charge you guys for the stuff that's happening for Nazers. But when I'm doing presentations like this and work like this, it's work. So donations and other effort are helpful because it is effort. All right, so I'm going to give you a PSA for this right now. One of the things about racing is that it always takes longer to talk about the things than it does to actually do the things. So fortunately, you guys are here of your own volition, which means you can stay as long as you want. So the longer you stay, the more details you're going to get. It's kind of designed that way intentionally, right? This presentation is also really specifically going to focus on racecraft and driving stuff. This isn't going to be a how to drive the car presentation. This isn't going to be a strategy presentation. This isn't going to be a car setup presentation. This isn't going to be a track walkthrough. I can do some group format style work if there's an interest for that, but it takes a significant amount of time to pull all the materials together and make sure people show up and yada yada yada. So I'm sort of letting the group decide if that's something they want to do, and we can kind of figure out how we set those things up. But I've been doing kind of freemium presentations for Nazareth for maybe about 4 years or so, and so that's one of those things that's kind of slowly changing a bit over time. So yeah. So, as with almost everything we do here, if you guys have questions as we talk about stuff, like jump in and ask. So this isn't going to be one of those things where hopefully where I'm talking for 90 minutes and you guys haven't asked a single question, because that would be a shame. But, I'm going to give you guys a bit of an agenda of the things we're going to cover. I'm going to record it and put it up on the Apex Advisory site with some subtitles and a few other links to some other resources and material kind of after. So if you've got to go, or you want to go driving, or you get bored or something else, like I'm not going to take any offense. I'm just going to run through the whole thing and try to get as much as I can kind of tied up with a bow, and then I'll post it, and then you guys can use it as you will. I'm also not going to do any live driving today because that's additional work on top of this work. So we're mostly going to be talking about like the theory of stuff and how to do things and how to set things up. Just keep the information kind of in your mind as you go to drive again. I work with people individually when it comes to the application of this stuff, and if you guys want to do like a more hands-on kind of workshop thing, then what I said before about doing kind of like a premium sort of thing might apply if we want to put in some significant effort, or if you catch me practicing or something. But what we're going to talk about today is some of the prerequisite skills you're going to need to have in order to learn how to have good racecraft. We're going to talk a little bit about attacking maneuvers and what those are, defensive maneuvers and kind of what those are, and then some of the details around those both, because there's a lot of idiosyncrasies that people don't think about and that we should talk through. I'm gonna take a pause, see if there are any questions so far.
Nope, I got it. All good. All right.
Great. Okay. Before we also dive in, I want you to be aware there are a couple quizzes in this, so I hope you guys are going to be paying attention. If I hit silence when I hit a pop quiz, we are going to sit in silence until someone answers one of them. So part of the pace we go through will be down to your own discretion, and also how much my phone rings. All right. So prerequisites. So let's talk about what Racecraft is, right? So Racecraft is really about skills and tactics, strategic decision making, and the benefits that come with those, right? We are moving beyond the realm of hot lapping, and we're talking about how to actually race people, right? You guys have probably heard me talk about the concept of the speed pyramid before, about, the 3 stages of what it takes to be a good racer, right? Stage 1 is, can you drive safely? Can you go around the track without crashing? Stage 2 is, can you go fast? Can you push the car to the limit? Can you get a good lap time out of it? And then stage 3 is racing. Can you strategically make choices with other opponents and get yourself the best outcome possible? Stage 3 is the sexy one that everybody wants to do, but they typically don't have the skills to execute on those things. And as the pace of your opponents increase, you kind of bounce between stages 2 and 3, as you have to figure out how to drive fast enough to be able to compete with the people that you're racing against. A lot of people that I talk to, they are slow and they say, oh, well, I really want to work on my racecraft. But in order to do that, you need to actually have the driving skills to be able to keep up with the people that you are actually trying to compete with, so that you can do these strategic things. So they kind of go hand in hand. Like you can't race me if you're 6 seconds off. All I have to do is drive normally, and then we're not even racing, right? So you need to kind of be mindful of that. This is also kind of one of those skills things that you have to develop over time as part of the craft, right? It takes a long time and a lot of reps, and there's a lot of battles to be in to kind of learn how to do these things. This is just to kind of open your mind to what to think and look for, right? But your racing won't immediately just get better because I've been talking, right? If that's the case, I should be charging more money. But a lot of times folks like read a ton and they never practice the things they read, and then they don't get better. They also totally ignore the fact that there is a theory behind a lot of this, and then just hit you with bullshit rhetoric. So I'm trying to dispel a lot of that and give you some information. Questions?
All good for me, Davin. That sounds good.
Hooray! All right. So what skills do you need? Good car control, good pace, knowledge of the track, good understanding of the racing line and the impact on your car and your opponent's car, and then the ability to be patient, right? This isn't one of those like just because I can means I should sort of things when racing people. Every battle is going to be situational. It's not one of those A plus B equals C automatically kind of things, right? There's so many conditional variables. There's so many conditional factors. We can talk about what I would have done in one battle as much as you want, but another battle will come up with slightly different circumstances and I'll do something different. Right? So don't be binary when it comes to racing. What you really need to be focusing on is building repetition so that you can see the patterns and shades of gray amongst all the races that you're in. So you kind of have things to reference when you're in the races that are important. But at the end of the day, racecraft is pattern recognition, right? Like a car can only turn in so many ways. Right? A corner can only be so many degrees. There's only so many things that can happen to the car when you enter the turn, when you get off the brakes, when you do a lot of these things. And unfortunately, most people don't pay attention to any of it. And when they have mistakes, they don't take time to review those mistakes or learn or ask somebody what has happened. So they continue to repeat the same patterns over and over and over again and continue to fail over and over and over again. If you take more of a learning mindset of how you observe your races and how to kind of notice the patterns from those things, your racing will automatically get better because you'll start to identify these things more quickly. You'll start to say, oh shit, I've seen that before. And then you'll start to apply different tactics, right? Most of the guys that you can think of that are kind of slow and kind of suck at racing just continue to make the same mistakes over and over again and expect different results. Fortunately, that's not how this works. Okay. So I've got this concept that I use when I talk to people about racecraft, and I call it the SPT concept. It's speed, position, and timing, right? you need to know how fast you're going. You need to know how fast your opponent's going, because that's going to dictate when you get to them, when you're going to be able to overtake them, when things happen. You need to understand your positioning left and right on the track, relative to you and relative to the racing line, like to the ideal line, because based on where these cars are positioned, they can only do so many things to make the corner effectively. And if those cars don't do those things, they just drive off the track automatically. So often you can be following a car and it can be out of position, and you can say, if it doesn't hit the brakes at this point, it's going to go off the road. I don't need to do anything. And then you just wait. Or you can say, hey, this person's on the same line as me. I'm aligned to stern to them. I literally cannot exceed their speed. If we do the same thing, there's no reason to attack here. I'll just wait. Or this person's on the left side of the track when the turn goes right. Or they're on the right side of the track when the turn goes right. And those are two different things, right? They're dead in the water now. I can pass them here, or I can pass them there. So you need to be able to understand those things. Fortunately, you only have to deal with two directions, left and right. So it's not too challenging. I'm going to give you a couple examples later in this presentation from the chasing car's view, looking at a lead car, and we're going to talk about what kind of information you can glean just based on where a car is positioned. Because there's a lot of data that opponents give you when you're following them, that once you learn to observe them, you'll be more comfortable in battles, because they're constantly giving you information. You just need to be looking at them and not worried about driving your car. It's kind of where the speed paragraph comes from, or speed pyramid comes from. And then there's timing, right? Like the ability to wait until an appropriate opportunity presents itself and not just run into the back of them because you're panicking. The ability to let your opponent make a mistake by turning first and watching which way their car goes up the track before actually going underneath them. The ability to not just rush into a corner before the car in front has finished turning so you hit them. These are things that everyone here has at least done once, because I've watched you all drive, right? And that's where this concept of this framework really comes from, because most of the time, most of you don't pay attention to one or all three of these things, and that's typically why you end up having problems. Any questions so far?
All good, Davin.
Okay.
Make sense to me.
Anyone else? All right, moving on.
Yeah, I have a question.
Ooh, questions. I got questions. Yay.
You mentioned the pace, so what kind of to get me my hair, but what's the pace that you think you can move from sort of pace to not, like, is it 105, 104, 107?
That's a really good question. That's a great question. So, it's going to be relative to the people around you, right? And I know that's going to sound like a wishy-washy, it depends, but it's realistic, right? If you're in rookies, you're not racing me, because I'm just going to pull away from you. So you're going to want to look at the people who are generally around pace around you and figure out kind of how consistent they are and how they drive. And then for a little while, like as you're kind of working your way up through that 105, 104, 103 pyramid, like I would personally say that anything between 103 to 107, you're just driving badly. So taking a look at where you're positioning your car on track, how much width of the road you're using, right? Kind of how much you're trail braking are easy ways to eliminate a lot of the errors that you would just naturally pull away from somebody if you just cleaned up where your car was on the racetrack. And then, as you start going faster, you kind of wiggle back and forth between when do I need to do racecraft things versus when I need to just have pace, because you can out racecraft faster people who are sloppy and not paying attention, right? But you need to be close enough that you can take advantage of those folks. So it kind of all depends on what class you're racing in, who you're racing against, how many of those people there are, things like that. Yeah, good question. Somebody else have a question, or I thought there were two.
I might have a follow-up question on that. So for the paces, right?
Yeah.
The 103s to 107s.
Yeah.
If you end up in a pace by yourself, right? How do you try to find somebody who you can kind of battle with to kind of learn these or improve on these techniques?
That's a great question. Another great question. Okay, so put faster people behind you and work with them, right? The reason we do trains on hop, and the reason why you put the slow car first, is because that way there are always cars in your purview, and you always have someone faster to talk to on how did you catch me? What did you do? How did you get there? Where am I weak? Right? Those are questions you can always ask when you have a faster car behind you. If you're trailing faster people, they just get away. So it is no longer helpful for you because they're just up the road, right? And just saying drive better is no good. But if I'm following you, Fagan, I can be like, oh my god, you miss the apex in turn 3 all the time. Oh my god, you miss the apex in turn 6 all the time. Oh my god, you're in the middle of the road in turn 8 all the time. And so it gives you information of areas you need to work on, because I can say, hey, I've been following you and you're super slow in these areas, right? A lot of times you can just let the faster guy have a bit of a margin. Let's say it's you and me, right? I would give you like a 5 or 10 second head start because I know I'm going to catch you. And then I'll just run my normal pace. And as I start to run you down, I can be like, oh God, the MFD really sucks you up in the second sector. Oh my God, you're in the middle of the road rather than on the left of the road. Oh my God, right? You see what I'm saying?
That makes sense. Okay.
So that's what I would say is always let the faster people help you by putting them behind you, and then they can tell you what they see.
So basically, kind of in HOP, be like, hey, I need a faster guy to kind of follow me. And
Yep.
Improve from there. Okay.
Yep. Slow cars first, right? That's also why it's always a detriment for you guys when you let the faster guys just drive away, because you didn't know what was happening for them to catch you in the first place, and they're going to be gone so fast that you're not going to learn from them very often. You need to talk to them. That's why we have social channels. You need to be like, hey, Davin, how the hell did you do that? And most of the people around here will tell you in a heartbeat. You guys just don't ask, right? And I always assume that if you don't ask me, you're just happy with the speed that you're driving. That has always been a coaching mandate. If you're 6 seconds off the pace from me and not asking for help, I'm assuming you're still having fun. And so I'm just going to let you continue to do that because you didn't ask. But the minute that you are asking and are interested, I'm here to help. So, and almost everyone else here is.
Thank you.
All right. So you guys need to know the tracks and you need to know the line. Like, you can't race people if you don't know the elements of the racetrack, and you can't race people if you don't understand not only the ideal line, but how to adapt off the ideal line. It's just a fact of life. What most of you guys think of as racing is a lottery. You guys just throw your cars in at the end of straightaways, close your eyes, and hope you beat the guy to the turn. And that is not racing. That is just roulette, right? So you'll never get good at those really complex battles because you're not learning how to be adaptable, right? There's some simple concepts I'm going to throw out front so that for those who get bored and leave, they at least get something out of this, right? But the first one is always, the farther you are from the ideal racing line, the more you must steer, which hurts your entry and hurts your exit, right? Input into the car is generally slower, right? So putting more steering in acts like a kinetic brake because it adds slip angle. Putting an excess amount of brake in is obviously bad because it slows the car down more than it needs to be. Adding too much rotation also adds too much slip into the car, right? And you get a lot of those things by narrowing up the corner. There is a engineering reason why the fastest way through a racetrack is using most of the width of the racetrack, so that the car has sweeping momentum to go through a bend as quickly as possible. It needs room in order to go fast. If you start anywhere, if you take away any of its room, the car will go slower than it can. That's the simplest way I could think to put it, right? Most of you guys don't think about how much room you are using. As you start getting faster, you start to use any paved surface that's available, not just the blacktop. So in a lot of tracks, let's use Red Bull Ring for example, there's a lot of places where you can put more of the car off the road where it's still paved, where you could simplify your ability to turn. It would widen the turn. I think of like places like turn 4, turn 6, turn 9, where you can use almost on the outside of the white line that extra couple of feet to make the corner wider, which allows you to carry more speed, which allows you to turn less, which allows you to go faster. Most of you guys don't think about that. Most of you guys just try to close your eyes and hang on and steer, and you can tell because the moment you turn the wheel, the car is sliding all over the place. So I would go back to your fundamentals of, do you understand the racing line and its impacts on your vehicle before you do anything? Because effectively, even when we dig into the details here, all we're really doing is taking comparisons from the ideal line and adjusting. Questions? None. Wow. Okay, I'm doing amazing apparently. All right. You need to know the numbers or the names. I don't care how you do it. I don't care if you do it by name. I don't care if you do it by number. I don't care. I don't care how you do it. But you need to know these things because if you don't understand the strategic elements of the racetrack,
Good.
yo,
Can you go back a slide? I had a question, but I had my mic muted.
go ahead.
So, are there going to be times where you need to sacrifice your ideal line to get the pass done? And when do you tell the difference?
That is going to be covered a lot later. That is a great question. We have not talked about passing anybody yet. We have been talking about driving. But that's a great question.
Sure.
You just gotta wait.
Okay.
Yeah, great question though. Great question. So, the reason why you need to know the track is that there are strategically more beneficial places to pass than others. We're going to talk a little bit about expense and why certain places to pass are more expensive than others. Typically, if there are a lot of corners and a lot of turns coming up, it's very expensive because every time you come off the ideal line, you're throwing lap time away. So it's cheaper to make passes out of long straightaways, for example. It's cheaper to make passes coming from like high speed to low speed than it is on complex corner sections because you don't have to turn as much. So, for example, for a track like this one, coming out of turn one would be very expensive. Or going into turn one would be expensive. Coming out of turn one would be cheap. Going into turn three would be expensive, medium expensive. 5, 6, 7, super expensive. 9, extremely expensive. 10, ridiculously expensive. Right? This is a track that is very simple and has very few turns. So every time you attack when there's a turn, it's going to cost you more lap time than if you just waited when the car's natural rolling speed would take you by a car. So most of you guys are so caught up on this whole, oh my god, I'm too wide with them, you're not really considering how much money you're spending when you are battling them, and you lose a ton of time. And we are going to talk about in a minute why that strategically hurts your races way more than it should. So that's the thing. Okay. Pop quick.
Hey, Devin.
Yes.
For learning racing lines, what do you recommend is just, a lot of these tracks, I think, maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, but for rookies in general, I'm sure a lot of these tracks, like we've probably run once or, nuts.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the most efficient way to learn a racing line and sort of learn how to deal with, I don't know, just playing around the line?
Great question. All right, so I think the simplest way is think about the concept of the racing line, right? The racing line inside of itself is actually quite simple for most tracks and most corners everywhere, right? We're trying to use the most amount of width, less left to right, without losing any depth where we miss the turn. So effectively, every time I go through a turn, I'm trying to make the corner as wide as possible without going too deep so that I don't have to come back. When I am going through a track and I'm trying to figure out what the line is, I'm always asking myself, how close am I to the inside curb? How early was I to the inside curb? How much did I have to turn when I hit the inside curb? And start to adjust based off there, right? On the whole, for most corners, on most tracks, on most places, most of the time, we're aiming for a mid or late apex, right? So we want to be closest to the inside of the corner, either in the middle or the latter half of the turn, because that means we've rotated the car enough in the early phase that we can accelerate in a straight line in the late phase. So regardless of whatever track we're on, we're still following that basic concept through almost all the corners. The only time that really doesn't apply is in a chicane because the corner directions change from left to right. So you can't go full right because the corner changed direction, or you can't go full right. So they're connected corners, right? But everywhere else, they're typically corners with some level of straight after them. So the full left to right or right to left concept applies.
Gotcha. So you think generally, like, taking a bit of a trial and error and critical thinking approach is better than just, for example, turning on the ideal racing line and running some laps like that?
Yeah, 100%. The racing line in racing games is lousy. It just kind of puts you in the middle of the road. It's not actually like the ideal racing line. It's just a driving line. It tells you that the track is going left or right, but it's not helping you use the full width of the track.
Yeah, right. Okay, gotcha.
So that can hurt you, right? And like everybody does it at first. I mean, like, okay, for example, I do it in the F1 games because F1 cars have really short braking zones and I don't break F1 cars. So my brain has a hard time understanding how short those zones are. So I sometimes keep the racing line on an F1 game because it's so fast and the short braking zones are so short, I don't want to have to take the time, and I barely play the damn game, so I just jump in, right? But for a game like ACC, I spend a lot of time in them, and the braking zones are relatively long. Like, they're anywhere between 100 to 150 meters generally from a brake zone. They're very long. So I have time to like brake and look at the corner and get the car turned. GT3 cars especially are extremely heavy compared to, let's say, an F1 car. So I need more time and room and space to slow down, right? The big thing that I will tell you, especially because you're new, don't start turning from the middle of the racetrack. Most people turn from, when they're new, they turn from the middle of the track and they're already screwed, right? So if you don't know where to go, start on the outside of the track. If you don't know where to go, put your outside tires by the white line before you turn in. You will naturally be faster than everyone else who just went from the middle of the track and turned, because it's not how turning works. And you'll find more time because you have more room. The turns are wider. You have more space, right? So it'll make it safer and easier and give you more room to maneuver. Where if you turn from the middle, you've cut the entry in half. So you're automatically screwed. It's already anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So
understood.
The other thing I'll recommend too is start at a slower speed and focus on accuracy first. Because all you're really doing when you're going at a high speed is adjusting where the car needs to be placed with additional speed. And so if you don't know where the car should be at a slow speed, it's impossible to do it at a fast speed. Most rookies try to go fast to impress people. And no one's impressed because a lot of times slow as hell anyway. And you end up missing apexes like they're going out of style. And what I mean by missing the apexes, you turn the car, you look down where the inside tires are, and they've missed the inside curbing by like 4 feet. So if there's pavement on the inside of your car when you get to the apex, you've messed up, right? But because you don't know where to adjust to get the car back in the right place, because you're just cannibal running the whole thing, you never fix it. Because you're just like, I think I could go through turn 4 faster. Well, if you're line shit, it doesn't matter how fast you go, right? And so you want to accuracy first and then apply speed, because now your brain goes, oh, I know exactly where I should be. This is the right place. Okay, got it. So to get into the same place with more speed, I just need to brake here and then turn here, and all the cars in the right spot again. All right? Versus what most folks do, which is just kind of close their eyes and do junk laps.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think I've been a little bit confused about the idea of why you do a slow lap, and just how that helps you understand the corners. But I guess your point about trying to find the sort of turn-in points that minimize your steering angle, I guess that sort of makes sense. For you do a slow lap.
If you don't know where to go, how do you know where to go? Right? If you go in at full speed and you just miss everything, what are you doing? You're just driving a really crappy line and surviving. So how can you optimize if you don't have a baseline to start? It's my theory behind it, right? Because a lot of like the weight transfer and all the other dynamic complex driving things could be distilled down to, well, the driver's just adjusting with adding more speed. But he knows where to put it. Versus most folks, they don't know where to put it. So they just are guessing.
Right.
And it's, there's only really 1 or 2 places you can go, and if I'm really being super brutal about it, there are going to be guys you could follow that already could show you where to go. But if we're not going to go slow, or we're not going to follow them and put their car in the right place, well, I'll see you in 5 years and we can figure it out eventually, because you'll just process of elimination and eventually get it. But I don't think you want to spend that much time here. So, start slow, work it out.
I feel like that makes a lot of sense too in the context of lifting weights. You're gonna lift less weight to correct form before you go into heavier weights. Same like this.
Exactly right. Good technique will yield better results than shit technique with speed every single time. So. Okay, pop quiz. Where are we?
Red Bull.
E3, Red Bull Ring.
How do we know
The
that?
worst corner on the track.
Yeah, you guys are correct. That's good. You passed the first quiz. How do we know where we are?
A couple of things. That billboard in the back
Okay.
is a big sign for me, and the fact that I know it's a right-hand turn and I see we're going up a hill.
Ah, you nailed it.
The elevation does a lot for me over on the right too. Yeah.
You guys nailed most of the things, right? So you've got the brake markers, the hill, the reference points in the background, corner direction, identifying markers like the marshal post and the light signs, a whole bunch of other elements, right? You need to know these things because that will help to dictate when and where you do things, right? Because what comes after turn 3, for example, is a long straightaway, which is a premier passing opportunity. If you get this correct and are able to carry momentum, you can pass cars coming out of here. You're also coming off a long straightaway at a T1. So if you get T1 correct, there's an opportunity to pass cars going into here, right? I picked Red Bull Ring on purpose because the track is fairly simple. And so overtaking opportunities are pretty easy to identify, right? But most of the time you're looking for places where there's a big change in speed. A high speed straightaway to a braking zone, things like that. Some place that gives you enough time to get alongside your opponent, get them positioned in the right place, let them see you, stop the car, and then turn, right? As your skills get better, you can do more sophisticated passes, right? You can pass people in more intricate places of the racetrack, but you only really want to do that with opponents who have the skills and situational awareness to know not to turn, or they can see you, or you're good enough to be able to make your car visible enough that they can see they've been defeated early on so they don't turn in on you. But when you're new, you want to try to think about where like the most rudimentary places to pass, just so that you don't put yourself in a dangerous situation, because you don't exactly know what's going to happen around you just yet, and you're not exactly skilled enough to manage your opponent, so you don't want to get killed because they didn't see you and they turned. Right? Fun fact, back to Lucas's point a little bit earlier. So on most tracks, not everywhere, but on most tracks, brake markers are set on the outside of turns, where you should be closest to. So not everywhere, but in most places, if you look at where the brake markers are, they will be on the outside of the direction of said turn. Places where they're not, well, they're not. But you know that because they're on the inside of the bend, and that's weird. But in most places, like as you're coming into turn 3, the brake markers are on the outside because they say, hey man, come over here. And then you can turn from there. So back to Lucas's question earlier, if you're wondering where to go, there are typically things to try to help. Okay, pop quiz number 2. Which of these 3 cars is off the optimal racing line? A, B, or C?
E.
Okay. Anyone else?
Second. The right car on C.
So I hear a couple B's, I hear a couple C's. Anyone else? Somebody was closer. All right. That is a trick question. It is B and C. Car B missed the apex, so they're not on the optimal line. See, there's space between the inside of their car when they're turning. That's a piece of information you want to be aware of. Car C is also off the optimal line because they are defending way too early. It's a right-handed turn, and he's on the right-handed side before he enters. That's another key piece of information that's super, super helpful. So being able to identify when your opponents are not on the racing line, and if you are, will dramatically increase your ability to pass them, because all you're doing is planning your timing based on where you're positioning and making sure you have the right speed, which is familiar. Looking at the black car, which of the cars ahead is off the optimal racing line? Yeah. All right.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, car C, that's similar to a situation we're talking about where he should have been further left to at least, kind of still have his racing line while defending.
Sure.
That's the defending tour. Okay.
Yeah. And if you're a chasing car, you're looking and be like, why are you so tight? Why are you so tight down here? Right? You don't want to be right on this car's ass because its line is trash and it'll affect you a lot. That's bad. So being able to identify when cars are on bad lines early really help. And these are some extreme examples because we're doing a seminar, so I need to make them obvious. But, you want to get a sense for, like, is this guy actually on the line or not? Does he know where to drive or not? And that'll help to dictate if, when, how you end up passing folks.